What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Josh Trujillo. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Man, I'm so excited. You've worked on a lot of Blue Beetle stuff, Washington's Gay General. Like you have a huge assortment of comics, and I want to dig right into your work and stuff like that. But first and foremost, have you always loved comics, or did this come in later in life, like falling in love with comics? And
No, it's always been my thing. Like even when I was like a 2 or 3 year old, I don't remember it, but my grandparents would read the Sunday newspaper comics to me. So like Garfield or Peanuts or whatever. And so I would trace over the Garfield comics. I'd rearrange the panels to make my own stories. So I was like writing my own comics from like before I could remember writing anything.
yeah, that's
But it
that's
wasn't until like, yeah, it wasn't until like the animated shows that like Batman the animated series or like X-Men the animated series, Spider-Man, like that's when I really got into the superhero stuff. And that kind of like that's how I found comics. But it wasn't until probably I was a teenager when I actually had a little bit of spending money that I could actually buy comics.
yeah. So you said you kind of started early, tracing over Garfield stuff and writing your own comics. At what point was it though for you where you kind of said, I want to pursue this a career in writing?
Oh man, that's it's all I've ever wanted to do.
Yeah.
Well, even when I was a kid, I was like, I want to be work for a newspaper and write my own Sunday newspaper strips, or I want to make my own cartoons or video games. And so that was always the plan. But like reality hits you pretty hard when you graduate. So uh, I worked in restaurants, I waited tables, I bartended for about 10 years, and I still wanted to write, but I wasn't doing much of it on the side. So I had a couple internships, but they never materialized into jobs. And finally, I realized if anyone was going to hire me to make comics, I had to make comics myself. So, I had to prove myself that I was capable of doing it. So that meant saving up paycheck to paycheck. Every paycheck, I'd have enough to pay an artist for one page. And I'd do that every time I got paid for 30 weeks until I got enough pages to make a comic. And then I had to save up to print the comic. I had to save up for the table at the convention. Like thankfully I had friends who I could like borrow a little bit of money so I could table at Long Beach or this or that.
Yeah.
So like it was always my passion, but it wasn't until probably about 10 years of trying to figure out how to break into comics that I got my first job. And I was doing a 2-page story for a boom book called The Reason for Dragons by Jeff Stokely and Chris Northrup.
Okay.
And so like, that turned into an Adventure Time audition, which turned into graphic novels, which turned into Rick and Morty, and so it just keeps building and building.
Yeah. And now here you are, currently working writing Blue Beetle, and which has been fantastic. So what a cool story of journey of processing through. And I got to tell you, you ever make it out to, I'm from Columbus, Ohio, that's where I'm based, and if you ever make it out to here, they have a cartoon museum
Heard.
library, and it's Garfield, Peanuts, Calvin and Hobbes stuff. And so like it sounds like it'd be something like right up your alley, but they have a whole archives of the library that you can literally just sit in their reading room and say, I would love to request these, and they'll just bring them out to you, and you can just flip through all the old stuff. So it's so cool.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. Like, I have a lot of respect for like the old stuff, obviously. So like, that's like a kid in a candy store for
Oh
me.
yeah. Yeah. So definitely got to check that out if you ever come see here. So you were grinding for a while trying to create comics, like you said, the whole wait literally 30 weeks to make a comic because you had to wait to pay, like that is dedication. So where did the leading your foot in the door, how did you get into working with stuff with DC?
Yeah. So, it's comics is a lot of like building relationships with people, building relationships with artists and editors, and the people who are interns or assistant editors or work in production, they become the editors of the next generation, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I had an internship at a comic company called Archaea. They're now part of Boom. They're an imprint of Boom. But I worked with an editor who went on to work in the DC office, and she recommended me. They were trying to do a Blue Beetle one shot, I think is what the idea was. This was maybe like 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
And they're like, "Oh, Josh would be a perfect fit. He just did this book, Dodge City. He has a good ear for this kind of character." So that never went anywhere. And she ended up leaving the company. I thought that was that. But her editor, her assistant editor, Andrew Marino, uh, really like took it to heart and like found a way for me to get gigs at DC doing a Superman comic first, a Flash comic, and these little like digital shorts they had. And so, the whole time we're talking about Blue Beetle, but the character had kind of been put back on ice for a while,
Yeah.
and there wasn't a lot of like demand or hunger. Uh, and so the DC had a competition maybe a few years ago called the Round Robin. And so it was like a bracket style elimination tournament.
Yeah.
And the winner got their book greenlit and made a miniseries. We didn't win. And that's like a very agonizing because the fans vote on it, right? So
Yeah.
you immediately they're like, it's like you versus Harley Quinn, and you're like, oh, we're not gonna win this one. And so we didn't win, but we're good sports about it. And I thought that was that for Blue Beetle. I didn't realize there was a movie going to be happening. And so, a smart publisher wants to have something new to coincide with the movie. And so they're like, oh, we have a perfectly good Blue Beetle pitch right here. And so that's kind of when I got contacted. So we'd spent maybe 4 years, 3 years talking about Blue Beetle before anything ever came of it.
Oh wow. I I at first I was so excited when you're like, oh, we did the round robin tournament because I had Kenny Porter on who was also in the round robin tournament with Superboy. So now I feel like I was like, oh man, I don't want to bring that up. But you have a Blue Beetle, and yeah, like you said, if a publisher's like, hey, we got a movie, we need to have something new. So was what you pitched, was that graduation day?
Yeah, I pitched the form of graduation day.
Okay.
Uh, we knew we wanted to move Jaime to kind of the next chapter of his life. Not that like there's still a lot of stories to tell in his origins in El Paso, but it was just time for like a fresh take. And so we knew they were doing. I didn't know what was happening in the movie. I didn't work on the movie or anything, but like we knew they were moving into a new city called Palmera City, and we knew that the villain was going to be Ted Kord's sister. And so they're like, would you like to introduce those elements to the comics? And I'm like, if it's not me, who else, right? Like
Right.
let's come up with the best way to do this as I can. And so, that was like a thrill. I added them to my outline and then we came up with some other concepts. So I wouldn't say it's 100% what we originally pitched, but
Yeah.
like it was a lot of opportunity and a lot of exciting things kind of going on too to like ride that wave. So like the movie is a total blessing for a million reasons for me. But the big one is I think it made our story better.
Mm, nice. So um, have you always with the character like Blue Beetle, you were pitched by your editor of like be perfect for it. Was it a character that you were very familiar with, or was this something that you kind of started to get familiar with?
No, I was very familiar with Jaime. I was reading monthly comics, like everything DC was publishing around the time of Countdown to Infinite Crisis.
Yeah.
And I knew who Ted Kord was, the second Blue Beetle. And so he gets kill off, spoiler alert, in Infinite Countdown to Infinite Crisis. And so it was all kind of this build up to the next Blue Beetle. And so I was there every step of the way. But I guess I missed a month or something because I didn't see the issue he debuted until I saw a trading card with Jaime on it. And so I was playing this old card game called Versus System. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was like a Marvel versus DC card game. So they introduced a lot of elements from the Infinite Crisis into this expansion set, and so Jaime was one of those cards. And so I'm like, oh my god, he's going to be the new Blue Beetle.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like this weird moment. Like it all kind of lined up. I love the original run with John Rogers, Coley Hamner, Keith Giffen, of course, and the whole team. But like characters always meant a lot to me. Like I see a lot of myself in him. I see a lot of my little brother in him. And just like I think he's just like a great modern take on like a young superhero character.
Yeah. So so you had graduation day. And then was the idea, because I know at the end of that you'd said Scarab War coming in September. Was that always the plan to kind of coincide with another drop around the time of the movie?
We knew. I think when I was writing issue 5, maybe the end of it, maybe I'd already written it, but
Okay.
we were going to get another mini series, and so I started to lay the groundwork for that at the end of graduation day. But we didn't know we were going to get picked up to ongoing until the day it got announced. So we were shocked, Adrian and I and the whole team. So like, it's one thing to be like, oh, you get another 6 issues. It's like, no, you get like a runway. You get
Yeah.
some run with this character. And that's like these days, that's such a blessing because you know how quickly books get rebooted and relaunched.
Mhm. So it was originally as a 6 issue, but now it is ongoing, moving
Yeah,
on.
so Scarab War was going to be its own 6 issue mini, but we got extended to ongoing. So the sky's the limit for us.
Well, and what I appreciate is, there's so many comics coming out nowadays that I actually miss graduation day. And
Mhm.
so um I picked up this Dawn of DC Blue Beetle. I was like, I gotta check this out. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And in prepping for the interview, I went back and read Graduation Day, and I'm like, oh, this is just like a continuation of Graduation Day stuff, but it, I didn't feel left out reading this arc like without having read that first.
That's so nice to hear because that's always the big fear, right?
Right.
Is like, oh, why is Sinestro wearing that belt? You know what I mean? Like, there's these continuity shifts or status quo changes that maybe aren't set up that well. But we
Yeah.
really wanted not just that Scarab War issue 1, but like hopefully every issue you could kind of like pick it up as you go.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I'm a testament to it because now, yes, going back and reading that and now reading Scarab again before, I was like, okay, things fall into place and it enhances the story because you have some background a little bit. But I thought you did a really good job, and I didn't know that going into it that you set it up as a new story where a new reader could hop on or an old reader could still enjoy what you were doing. And I think that is a talent that is not always there for writers.
Yeah, Marvel books have those recap pages at the front of them, and we don't got those at DC. So
No.
sometimes you have to repeat yourself a little bit.
Yeah, you're just like, here we go. So when you had the idea of, hey, we're gonna have a mini, which is now an ongoing with Scarabor, where did it shift how you were wrapping up graduation day arc, or was how did that process kind of come about a little bit more?
We talked a little bit about Scarab War and what that meant for Jaime and kind of what that meant for all these characters we introduced in Graduation Day. Because we knew we wanted to bring another big villain into the mix. And we have the Blood Scarab, who's kind of the big threat hanging over Scarab War.
Yeah.
Uh, so we we kind of talked a little bit. Adrian and I do Zoom calls every so often to kind of catch up. He lives in Spain, so we have to do the time zone thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, we were kind of laying the groundwork from like issue 6 on. There's a character, Gimmicks. She's an old Seven Soldiers character that Grant Morrison created in the 2000s, and I bring her back at the end of Graduation Day, and she's kind of our window into. Well, you'll find out later in the Scarab War arc what role she has to play in it. But I was like so thrilled to like resurrect my first character, and B like set something up that far away. Normally, you get like a 10-page backup story in a comic, or you do like a one shot, and like the idea that like no, like you're gonna do like at least 6 more stories with this character is like it's such a gift.
Yeah. You mentioned Adrian. How did the creative team come about for Blue Beetle?
We have our star general. We have Andrew Marino as our editor over at DC, and he knew for a long time that Adrian was going to be the guy. I remember getting lunch with Andrew way before even the round robin competition,
Mm.
and he was showing me Adrian's art, and he's like, "This is going to be your artist for Blue Beetle," and I was like, "Great!" Like he has that kind of like he has a very kinetic style. It's very energetic, and like it kind of evokes, for me at least, like the manga that I grew up with and like a
Mm.
lot of those like Sentai shows, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
and stuff. And so like it's a real good fit because like Blue Beetle armor kind of looks like a Sentai armor sometimes too. And so it's like a nice fit. And also like I can have a pretty relaxed writing style. And so he amps up whatever I'm doing to like that much more. So I think we really complement each other in that way.
Yeah. So how is it for you then as a creator of coming up with new ideas for a story like a character like Jaime, and Blue Beetle, of still respecting where it's been in DC with where that character's been, but bringing your own flavor to it and bringing something different to the world.
Yeah, so a big goal for graduation day, and especially for the new Blue Beetle ongoing, is like new,
Yeah.
basically. I want to do. I'm not ripping off Spider-Man, but we're doing a bit of a Marvel team up, right? Like every month, I want you to see a different corner of the DC universe you didn't see before in the past or the future, magic, whatever. Because that's what I think worked so well for the original run with John Rogers and Keith Giffen was like every issue you didn't know what was going to come next, and he's always in over his head, and he has the most powerful thing in the universe on his back, and he's still like wide-eyed and confused about what's going on. It's like it's a great recipe, I guess, for a lot of fun stories. So but in terms of like continuity and stuff, I follow that pretty closely. We just had the crisis on Dark Crisis on Infinite
Yep.
Earths that kind of reset the continuity again. But it's one of those like I love the way they did this. It's one of those like everything counts continuities now,
Yeah.
and so every story counts in some way, and like it's up to the writer to kind of navigate that. So we don't undo anything that's kind of been done. We're definitely like a love letter to that original Blue Beetle run that I fell in love with, but at the same time, we pay a lot of respect to Ted Cord. We feature characters from his original run in the 80s and even the 60s stuff he did. And then Dan Garrett, the first Blue Beetle, this whole Scarab War arc is kind of about him. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but issue 5 in particular, you're going to be like, wow, this is some deep pulls, Josh.
Okay. Because I mean, you lay the groundwork in 3 or 4. I forget which issue, where you're starting to see that a little bit with Dan's character. But I do love what I've loved about, I'm a newer reader to Blue Beetle. Like it's not, I haven't read a lot. My exposure to Blue Beetle was always whenever Blue Beetle showed up with Booster Gold, because I was a big Booster Gold
Yeah.
fan. So so a lot of Ted Cord, Blue Beetle, and that. And so I'm appreciating like getting to see glimpses of Ted Cord and Dan, of those other Blue Beetles, because I didn't get that exposure as much. And so it's been cool for me as a DC fan still, because there's so much out there. You can't consume it all, but to start to learn a little bit more about all the characters.
Yeah, like I'm not it doesn't escape me that a lot of fans who read Blue Beetle, this might be their only comic they read that much. And they're not going back in the back issues looking for comics from the 60s, but at the same time, I want to pay off those stories that came before for the people who have been keeping track are the Blue Beetle diehards, right?
Yeah.
And so like a lot of my, my late nights are going through old back issues on the DC Infinite app, and just like trying to piece together like, oh, that villain's so cool. Maybe I can find a place for him here. And like that's like the fun of comics, right? And it's nice because Blue Beetle kind of has his own little corner of the DC universe now. We have Palmera City. We're building out a rogues gallery for him. And so we have a lot of free reign to do what we want. We're not like tripped up because whatever the event of the moment is happening at DC, which like maybe we will someday, and we'll pay that off too, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, we'll hop on to some other of your other works here in a second, but you mentioned that the Blue Beetle movie. I can't even talk. It's been a long day. You didn't get to work on it. You said a connection, but what was that experience like for you? I'm assuming you've seen it. And so what was that experience for you of setting up kind of the stage in the comics and then seeing it and working on that, like, for you?
Um, we knew the stuff about Palmera City and we knew the stuff about Victoria Court, but we didn't know what was happening in the movie, and we didn't really know how they were going to be portrayed.
Mm.
So we really had to kind of guess. And it's funny because their Palmera City is very similar, I think, to our Palmera City. And I love that we both kind of like had the same mindset here. And then Victoria, I just kind of took a swing in terms of like what's a real threat look like
Yeah.
for Jaime, and also what does that mean to Ted Cord? He's a character that's been around for 50 years. He's never had a sister before, so we're definitely doing that kind of like retcon. But like
Right.
if we're going to do it, she has to be an important character in his life too. And
Yeah.
so like love the dynamic between them. She's a little more morally gray than he is, but I think that kind of works, especially if you know their family history.
Are you much of a collector? Do you have Blue Beetle statues and things now?
I was not, and now I am. I have I don't have it out, but I have the like they gave away for comic shops this like standee, this like
Yeah.
6 foot tall standee that like holds the books in it of like Blue Beetle. And so I have one of those. I don't have room for it right now, but I have like the backpack popcorn bucket, and I have like all these like figurines. It's just, so like my closet is just embarrassing with how much Blue Beetle stuff I have in it.
I
Because I love
mean,
the character. Like I gotta be the guy, right?
right,
If I don't get to fan out, who
right.
does?
I mean, yeah, I have shelves of Batman and Dick Tracy stuff here, so I don't think you have to worry about being embarrassed about being a fan.
No, I just don't have the space, honestly.
Yeah.
Like someday I'll get my like cave, you know?
Yep. That's I'm lucky that I have my cave here. So was there, especially in graduation day, I know you've done a lot of the digital, you did a handful of digital first and things like that. Was there when you were writing that, was there a character that you were writing where you're like a moment where you're like, holy cow, I'm writing dialogue for Batman or for Superman?
For those shorts, like it was really exciting to write any of them, and like Superman's voice comes pretty easily to me. I think
Yeah.
every like it's I don't know. I think it can be yeah. I feel like he's an easy character for me to write somewhat, but the character who I was most excited to write, I love the D list. I really do. I love the lesser known heroes. So in graduation day, I dig up this character named Black Condor, um, and so he's like a Native American superhero. He's basically like the son of like the spider god, I think, and he has like all these incredible abilities and kind of like a chip on his shoulder. And I think he's so cool. And his name's John Trujillo, and I'm Josh Trujillo, so I'm like maybe we're related. Like I got it. If again, if no one else is gonna dig this guy out, it's got to be me.
Please.
So I love to give those characters a chance to
Yeah.
really spotlight. Like that's important to me. Like we do have those pillars of like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman.
Right.
The DC universe is so much bigger and weirder than that. And
Yeah.
I hope that our book is like a chance to see some of those things.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time talking about DC and Blue Beetle. Talk to me about some of your other stuff that you've worked on outside of DC.
So let's see. I've done some Marvel stuff. I did a whole thing in Wiccan, two arcs for them on the Marvel Unlimited app, which I was really happy to do. But the big book that I had come out this past year is Washington's Gay General from Abrams. And so it's a nonfiction graphic novel. It's a true story ish about the legend of George Washington's general, Baron von Steuben. He served in the Revolutionary War. Oh gosh, he was a brilliant tactician. He really saved our butts in Valley Forge, and he taught our soldiers how to go from being farmers and craftspeople into being an army and fighting the biggest superpower in the world at the time, which was Britain. And
Yeah.
all of this stuff, and he was what we'd now call gay or just queer in some
Right.
identity like that. And so it kind of explores like this courageous life he led, like not just on the battlefield, but also like in his personal life. There were people who were like arrested for sodomy and punished and this, but his his talent, and also his class comes into a lot of it too.
Yeah.
He was able to live kind of a fearless life because of this luxury and uh, privilege afforded to him. But we touch on that, but we also touch on like the badass things he did. He was as general in the 7 Years' War. He trained under Frederick the Great. He was a prisoner of the Russians. He got injured in battle time and time again. He kept going back. And so we talk about him. We talk about the era, and we talk about kind of like these other figures that he interacted with who are maybe lesser known. Von Steuben is very famous in military history. If you go to West Point or whatever, they
Yeah.
teach about him. But he's not well known. He's not like considered a founding father. And part of that is kind of indicative of the way he was treated after the war ended by the government.
Yeah.
They were like, we're good. We don't need you anymore, dude. And so he kind of like spent the end of his life kind of wondering if it was all worth it.
Yeah.
And it's really a sad story, but there's a lot of humor and heart in it. And like it took years to write. My artist Levi Hastings, he drew the hell out of the thing. So I'm incredibly proud of it. And it's weird because like, sorry to go on a tangent, but
No,
like
go for it.
these monthly comics, it's like order Blue Beetle #5 or you'll never get it because they do one printing generally.
Right.
Like this is like a book that's going to sit on bookshelves for like who knows years maybe. Like
Yeah.
and they'll reprint it, it'll keep coming out, and so like it's not like something that kind of passes by. It's like that book is like a part of my life now.
Yeah. Well, and it is a part of your life too, because one of the things that reading that book I found interesting was how you weaved your stories through that story and was telling it, and it made it, you know, a very relatable story, I think, for people to go, oh, I see, you know, like it showed almost why there was some passion for why you wanted to tell this story.
Yeah, my editor, Mariko Tamaki and Charlotte Greenbaum, they kept telling me every time I turned in a draft, they're like, "We want to see a little bit of more of you in the book." And I was like, "No, it's very personal. Like, I give my opinion on things, and like, no, we literally want to see you and Levi in the book." And so that's how we kind of became characters in it. But I think it's a great entry point to learning about why we care about this world. So why should you care about this world?
Yeah. How did you get connected with, you know, finding out stories like, you know, the story that you're telling? You know, you had to do a lot of research, and, you know, when you're telling a nonfiction story that is not a very familiar story, it's not like you're telling like, oh, the history of George Washington. Like, how did you go about researching and figuring out this, or even figuring out this was a story you wanted to tell?
Yeah, so Levi Hastings and I did a comic. He has a beautiful artistic style, and he loves drawing like kind of period costume stuff. And so I was like, we got to do get together on a comic, and we were talking about basically what would be fun for him to draw. And we settled on the Revolutionary War. So we did a Revolutionary War comic, maybe like 8 pages, and we sold it at conventions, and we kept having to reprint it because people were snatching it up. This was around the time of Hamilton too. So uh, basically people would come to our table, oh, we love this, you got to do a comic about Baron von Steuben. And we're like, that sounds awesome. Who is Baron von Steuben? So that led to some late night Wikipedia wormholes, and you're just kind of digging around, and I realized there was so much to him, and also to like we kind of think that like there was Stonewall and then suddenly there were gay people, and
Yeah.
like we've always been there, queer people have always been around, but like maybe it's been harder to find. And for me, this really opened my eyes, learning about not just von Steuben, but these other characters who lived kind of prominent lives and were queer figures in their own right. And we don't talk about any of them.
Yeah.
And so, like, the real tragedy of it is like we know so much about von Steuben. There are hundreds of pages of hundreds of books probably written about him. Most of them don't talk about his sexuality or anything like that. But
Mm.
there are so many other people whose stories we'll never know. We don't have a clear idea of what living in that era really was like for someone who was queer. We only know about the heroes, right?
Yeah.
And like that's something we touch on in the book too.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, Josh, I appreciate so much that you know, what you bring to the table as a writer, you know, with obviously with Washington's Gay General and Blue Beetle. But I want to respect your time as well. Is there anything that we haven't touched on yet that you wanted to talk about or promote, or?
No, I mean, I don't think anything fun big's getting announced. We're doing a huge Scarab War finale leading into what's that, January and February, and
Mhm.
then after that we have maybe the most important story I've ever written in Blue Beetle #7. No, no brag or anything, but this is like it's some stuff's happening, and then beyond that, the book only exists because of our team. We try to hype each other up as much as possible. We've got Adrian Gutierrez. We've got Lucas Gattoni, our star letterer. He letters the book in English and in Spanish because Blue Beetle's available in English and Spanish. We're the only book DC does like that, and he's the only letterer who letters in 2 languages.
Hmm.
And so beyond that, we've got Will Quintana, who makes the book shine. And for issue 4, he was joined by Nick Filardi, and then our colorist for the covers, just Luis Guerrero, and our editor, of course, Andrew Marino, and then Katie Kubert overseeing the whole thing. But you know, these books are not easy to do, and I get to wake up every morning with fresh pages from Adrian, and it's been like that for like a year, and it is such a gift, man. It is the best feeling in the world to wake up to art, especially art like this.
Yeah. I hear that a lot of times when I interview creators. They're like, man, you don't understand like how cool it is when I open my inbox and there's art right there. You're like, oh man, this is cool.
No, it's a complete dream, and I can't thank the Blue Beetle fans enough. The Blue Beetle Battalion, like they've been hyping up our book, and we never would have gotten to an ongoing. We never would have even gotten a second miniseries if people didn't care like they did about the character.
Yeah. So, Josh, Thank you so much for taking some time. Where can people follow along with you with what you're creating, what you're working on? Or if they want to pick up stuff of Blue Beetle or Washington's Gay General.
You can go to your local bookstores or comic shops and ask for Blue Beetle and Washington's Gay General. You know, we talk about this endlessly, but like really do get a pull list, really do let the shops know what books you're passionate about. That's how they know what to order. And you can get Washington's Gay General at like Barnes and Noble or any of the big box bookstores, but try to find the local ones too. And just like you can follow me on social media at Lost His Keys Man. I lost my keys man. It's pretty much that across all platforms. So if you look up that, you'll find me.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about comics with me. It's been a blast.
No, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'll be
Yeah.
back any.
Awesome. So, gang, with that being said, go check out the books we've talked about, and hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.